Hi, I'm just going to give a really short contextualization to this film, because the film's 15 minutes and I've got 20, but that will be fine. This is the third part of a trilogy that I made between 2008 and 2016, 15. This was made in 2015. And the conceit of the trilogy was to do with how our subjectivity is formed through the childhood that we live. I was quite interested, I have always been very interested in communities and how communities shape themselves. And that was partly because I came from quite an orthodox Jewish background, and I kind of left that as a teenager, became a punk, and then became an artist, and you know, the rest, as they say, is probably not history, but this piece is very much to do with religion and how religion forms you. The first in the trilogy was about politics. So I interviewed people who grew up in left-wing political activist families. The second one, I interviewed people who grew up in the military. And the third one was people who grew up in Catholic background, Irish Catholic backgrounds in Liverpool. So there's kind of a series of triangulations across the three films. One of them is to do with geographical site, so it's like London, Newcastle, and Liverpool. The second one is to do with form, so it's portraiture, landscape, and urban landscapes, I guess. And you know, I think that, and also to do with the military, politics, the military, and religion, which anyone who knows is quite Althusserian. But I was very interested in the way in which these kind of structures form us or not. Lastly, you know, the way I make the work, it's a composite. So although I see them all as portraits, if you like, they're kind of portraits of a community, and therefore they don't cohere. People have different views, people say different things. I chose Catholicism partly because I spent quite a lot of time up in Liverpool at that point, and I was thinking about religion. Now, the obvious thing would be to do something about my own religious background, but I had spent, I've spent at least 10 years kind of making art about that in the past. What interested me about Catholicism is that it's a community and an ethnicity, if you like, that's not based on skin color. It's not based on geographical specificity in terms of where you come from in the world. Catholics are seen to be white, you know, by the British public, even though obviously it's a global community. But yeah, in the UK, certainly when I was growing up during the Troubles, Catholicism was seen very much to be like the other, you know, and those of you who know about Irish history particularly will know that, you know, Irish Catholics were quite beleaguered in, you know, the latter half of the 20th century. So I was kind of interested in this kind of idea of this ethnicity that comes from a kind of community that is has a lot of prejudice around it, but is not necessarily as recognized as, say, if you came from a black Caribbean background, for example. So I was kind of interested in those things. And I guess partly, again, it does link back to some extent to the Jewishness, because, you know, Jews are also a kind of ethnicity that's, you know, kind of not necessarily obvious, although obviously it's the narratives around Jewish ethnicity has changed a lot since 2015. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy it. It's quite visual. This was also where I was moving back towards a kind of more painterly approach to video as well, which was also my kind of, you know, Alma, my mother tongue, if you like, in art terms. So I'll stop there and let you watch it.
The Catholic Cathedral of Christ the King is climbing out of the ground in reinforced concrete. The architect is Frederick Gibbard, expert on town planning and the designer of London Airport. With the agreement of Cardinal Heenan, he decided to apply techniques of industrial construction, using methods and materials unknown to the cathedral builders of the Middle Ages.
When my nana had these statues that my mum inherited that were sort of neoclassical white things with drapey things, and my mum used to say that when the priest used to come round, she used to say, quick, cover the statues. So they would have to cover the neoclassical statue nakedness. Whereas for my mum, she proudly displayed her statues. And also my mum, I remember her throwing the priest out of our house at one point because she didn't like what he'd said. And I don't really know. She was quite tough, my mum, and certainly if he'd been racist in any way, she would have shown him the door.
And I was brought up in an area that was designated at the time as one of the roughest areas in Europe, and I was this camp kid.
Not over here, no.
Okay.
No. When I'm at home, I would still go with my mum to the parish church that I grew up in. I like the ritual of it.
With communities right against each other, and so there had been, as they grow up, there'd been fighting. People would walk onto each other's territory and get what was coming to them and stuff like that. So there was that was going on, but they had made, especially my mum, had made a real decision that wasn't going to happen in our family.
There were degrees or a spectrum of Catholicism and Protestantism.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thanks a lot.
Both born in Liverpool, both born in and around Scotland Road, and mother Catholic, dad Protestant.
The church became a very safe space for me.
No, she was utterly hypocritical. She never went to church, but forced us to, and it was part of our identity. Absolutely, you have to go to church. She just saw it as a ritual. It was your identity. It was what you did.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thanks a lot. By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young girl call, like a lake had taken you away.
Four and 6, 46. 7-0, blind 70. 5 and 6, 56. All the 5s, 55.
When I was 8, there was 3 falling accidents in the family, and 2 were fatal in 6 weeks. Yeah, and when that happens, then you know you're Catholic. And I think this is when I became completely Catholic. I mean, I was always Catholic, you're born into it, but this is when it became I became obsessed. Because she had these giant pictures of like the Last Supper and Sacred Heart, and really ornately framed pictures far too big for the room, in a sense. But they were gorgeous. They belonged in churches, you know. And holy statues, Madonnas and Jesuses, and red glass with tea lights in. And for me, after the the death of my first brother and feeling there was something terribly spiritual happens to a family when someone dies, whether it's physical, spiritual, or just or religiously spiritual. Something elevates, decreases. It's just enormous, especially a young death. And I found my grandma's environ incredibly comforting. And because remember there was a mess, and the family was a mess, and I found the whole thing quite emotional thing about it actually. Really soothing within all of this chaos, because it was chaos, and it was going to get more chaotic.
It's on Scotland Road, and obviously that territorial thing, because it wasn't the case on our estate. I mean, it was just didn't matter, it was just a random selection of people who lived on that estate in terms of religion or football affiliation. But the divide of Great Homer Street and Netherfield Road, that was still there, but not as explicit when I was a kid as it was 30 years earlier.
But they had made, especially my mum, had made a real decision that wasn't going to happen in our family, partly because I think there was a sense of not growing up with bigotry, and partly a sort of socialist sense that, we were all from the same place actually, and this was sent to divide us rather than something that actually helped any sort of solidarity.
But the divide of Great Homer Street and Netherfield Road, that was still there, but not as explicit when I was a kid as it was 30 years earlier. But it was still, basically the Orange Club was right close to there, and then there were one or two big, quite symbolic Catholic churches, and all the streets that were just one or the other were all around there. But that diluted slightly when I was a kid. The thing that did still exist was the marching from the marching route went straight along. And that's where we used to, again, the territorial nature of that and the clannish nature of that was the point at. They gathered there and just throw bricks at the lodge as they were marching past. That was a Sunday morning ritual. Often when we were going to play football, I used to play football in the Scotland Road League from age 10 to 14. And so on the way to football Sunday morning, we'd hopefully coincide with the lodge marching, gather up the top there, throw bricks at them, run, because they always leg it after us as well. It was a little game,
So they were expecting it?
Yeah. That was good. And we knew half of them, it was just a little... It was strange. It was a bit like, you play a football match against someone and you kick lumps off each other while the game's going on, and then afterwards you're fine,
Yeah.
Until I became even gayer, as a gayer thinking adult, and I don't know, the priest started doing really homophobic sermons and stuff like that, and then suddenly you realise, oh God, no, this isn't safe.
But there's an outsider feeling, I think, that came from it too. And I think it's partly a class-based thing. But I think... So this hasn't got to do with Catholicism in a way, but in a way Catholicism runs through it.
She just saw it as a ritual. It was your identity. It was what you did.
So the shooting gallery was in the basement?
In the basement of a building that was just here, probably an extension of that one. Because the main road was out here, and the tailor shop went out onto the main road, and it was in the basement of the tailor shop. So somewhere along here.
I do miss aspects of it occasionally. I again go back to like your own kids when they're 14, 16, classic teenagers, do whatever they want, whenever they want, or try to. And I occasionally think, wouldn't it be good if they were like, they had to go to church and actually just reflect and get off their phone? Genuinely, that's...
There's not a lot of social mobility, and a lot of Irish Catholics were working class, stayed working class, tended to be at the poorer end of the community as immigrants, and tended to not necessarily hugely move away from that. So people, you know, people's mobility, the physical, geographical mobility wasn't great either.
There's some, I think also that was a much more confident working class then than it is now.
When all the pieces were in place, the first layer of epoxy resin mix was squeezed out between them.
Yeah, it comes from lobscouse, which apparently is Norwegian for scouse, a sailor's stew. It's a really poor stew. And some of the earliest references to it that I've found anyway are in poorhouses, not particularly in Liverpool, but all over the country that served scouse, because, you know, it's basically whatever you can find in a pot. Yeah. So that's where scousers came from, and it was pejorative because they were the people who ate that stuff.
Ask me occasionally why they got christened, and I explained what I've just said. You know, it's like you go to watch Everton. It's not much fun, but you got to do it.
Liverpool born, but my dad's dad was born in Mayo, and then my dad's mum, her father was born in Mayo as well.
Cultural kind of orientation.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think which is bring it forward to my kids. I got them christened. I wasn't really sure why. You know, when they were about, I think it was slightly old, 3 and 4.
Fortunately, and I know this wasn't the case for many couples, my mum's family loved my dad. You know, there was no issue in terms of where he was from or his background or anything like that, and my parents have always said to us, like, there are two sides. Think of both before you make a sweeping statement, or try and look at it, try and put yourself in another's shoes.
In the middle of this, I was really the wrong shape for when I was born. Really, it was.
What are you doing? You know, you're in the middle of Liverpool. You know, no one gives a crap about England or nationalism. We're Scouse.